All right, Piston fans and slash Lions fans. This is your guy. We're coming back with another one, and this is going to be a rant. Well, as always, this is another rant. Um, we're going to talk about, of course, both professional teams in the Lions and in the Pistons. The question becomes like, are you a Lion? The question that I get, a little bit from time to time is, why aren't you a Lions fan? And well, there's so many reasons why, but if I were to break it down to maybe two factors, how the Lions organization has been and probably will be, is why the quote unquote, I hear the I think his name is Bobby Lane. I believe, excuse me, I believe he was the quarterback, the last quarterback to actually win something here, and it's a quote that comes along. Well, I won't say a quote, but it's a statement that, yeah, guess you could say is a quote that comes along with his name, is that the Lions is cursed and they won't win for 50 years. Whatever happened then, it still continued to happen to this very day. Whatever the reason for him making a statement that he did then, how the ownership or whoever traded him or whatever that issue came about, it's still happening to this very day. That's why the curse continues to be, I guess, speculation for this team. But if pushing the curse aside, I'm going to say that this team cannot win until they redo what they did over 50 years ago, because that's when it started. The root goes back to that point. It doesn't go back to 91, because if it goes back to 91, they was on the cusp of actually going to the Super Bowl. They was one game away, and that got broke down. They got tore down. They didn't re-sign the players. So whatever that they did back in the 50s for him to make that statement is still current on. Is still carrying on, and it's still happening to this very day. That's why this franchise, there's no way I could see them actually winning a Super Bowl unless it's rigged. It has to be rigged based upon what I'm coming to understand about what happened back then in the 50s, when they was like the most dominant team in the NFL. Even though there was no Super Bowl, the Super Bowl era hasn't started, but the Lions was considered like one of the most dominant teams, if not the top three dominant teams in football. How did you go from that to, and as soon as the Super Bowl era starts, you're incompetent, you're obsolete, you're not even relevant, you're not even you're not even a content. How does that happen? Something happened then that carried over and has been following them. It's a root, and until that root, until this ownership goes back to that root of what happened then, and basically either expose what happened or redo or somehow rectify that situation. I don't know how they can, because it seems like it's a continuous thing that happened then that they continue to do now. And that's my rant about the Lions and why I'm not a Lions fan and why I won't be a Lions fan. However, I am a Pistons fan. Why? Because the Pistons gave me something to support. They gave me the bad boys. And the reason why I support the Pistons is mainly because of the bad boys, because of what I saw Isaiah, Bill Laimbeer, and I believe Vinnie Johnson was the first three that came to this franchise. Isaiah was drafted, Bill Laimbeer was traded for, and I believe Vinnie Johnson was traded for. I believe they was the first three pieces. And then, of course, you draft Dumars and Dennis Rodman and Sally, and you as a free agent, or you traded for Rick Mahorn from Washington, from the Bullets, and I believe they traded also for James Edwards. So that deals a factor. And Gerald Henderson, when they won their first title, I believe he came from Boston, and they picked him up as a free agent or something, that sort of thing. But they gave me something to support, though they constantly give me something to support, because the Pistons, how they did it, with Jack McCloskey and let's say we'll start off with the owner, Bill Davidson, Jack McCloskey, and Chuck Daly. They all was very inventive. From you could tell Bill Davidson was inventive, like how he built the Palace, how he was. I believe he was the first owner to get a team playing. He was the first owner to invest into his team, from my understanding. Okay, so you have him. Then you have the general manager, Jack McCloskey. Jack McCloskey, how he did it, how he brought in Chuck Daly. I believe Chuck Daly either was an assistant or he was a first-time coach wherever he came from. And he didn't do too well wherever he came from. But Chuck Daly was what they call a Sweet Daddy Rich, but he was inventive along with Jack McCloskey. And so when they brought certain players in, I believe Chuck Daly was at Cleveland with Bill Laimbeer. I believe. I could be totally wrong, and forgive me if I am. And then you get down to you have Bill Davidson, Jack McCloskey, and Chuck Daly. Chuck Daly comes in with this offense to he had a star in Isaiah Thomas, and between Jack McCloskey and himself, they built off of that. Now, Vinnie Johnson was starting at some point, but when they drafted Joe Dumars, for Joe Dumars to get his touches, he's gonna have to come off the bench. And when they gave him, they okay, you come in, you get the green light, you go ahead and shoot it up. So Chuck Daly was inventive, and even with that, to the point of how he implemented like the trio of the backcourt. And to this very day, Detroit Pistons arguably have the best 3-guard rotation in NBA history. So, because any night, any one of those three can light you up. And any one of those three, I can say they can carry the team to a certain extent. Isaiah probably by far, but either one of them could have a night that, they in a zone. And so that was inventive with that, along with when you got you got to give props to Jack McCloskey for drafting Dennis Rodman. Who saw that coming? Who saw that? Nobody saw that coming. And he had an eye for like guys that Jack McCloskey looked outside of the box, or he thought outside of the box. Chuck Daly thought outside of the box. Bill Davidson thought outside of the box. That's a franchise I could get around. I could get behind. When it comes to the Lions, it's like the opposite. They think inside the box. And it, like I said, I believe that's the root of what caused them to lose for over 50 years. They think inside of the box. The inside of the box is let's make our money and whatever happens next happens next. I don't think winning is an optional. If it happens, it happens. The reason why I say that because if 91, you're one game away, all you have to do is build off of that. Build off that roster. But from my understanding is they let players walk because they didn't want to pay. So it comes down to that root, which I believe what has to do with the trading of Bobby Lane. I don't know. This is all speculation. This is all coming off the top. So I'm not really. There's no really as the fans would like to look into. They like to hear facts and all that good stuff. But if it's repeating itself, that's the fact by itself. Is there something that is constantly being done that hasn't been rectified, that hasn't been dug up, haven't been exposed? In other words, it's like they haven't repented from their ways. They haven't changed from their ways. And so this organization has never changed. If you're losing over 50 years, there's a reason why you're losing over 50 years. Now, the fans could say, well, it's the upper management. They didn't get the right GM. It still goes back to whoever's owning the team. The team is only going to be built in the image of the owner. Even if the fans are saying like the owner has no sports knowledge at all, well, that has nothing to do with it. If you're going to win, you're going to win. There's no way you can convince me to believe that Jerry Jones is like a football knowledgeable guy. I think he got his hands on, when Jimmy Johnson, I believe, showed him the ropes, because up until Jimmy Johnson, that franchise was horrific. It was terrible. Even though he got it when he came in, he bought. I think Tom Landry had Tom Landry, and I don't know if he retired or they had just bought the team. And I don't know if he was still on that team or not. I believe he bought it in the 70s, I believe, late 70s. But anyways, where I go up all the way up till we'll say Jerry Jones took over, that team was pretty much a legit team. You could say the same thing with the Lions. The Lions was a pretty much a legit team until all the way up to the Fords. So there's something about what when those two owners came in, they're doing something a little differently. Now, don't get me wrong, Jimmy Johnson. If Jerry Jones would have got out of Jimmy Johnson way, they would have won at least another 3 more titles. Because I'm a 49ers guy to the heart, not this new regime, but the Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Roger Craig, Ronnie Lott era, all the way up to the Steve Young, Ricky Waters, that era. Dana Stubblefield, Brian Young, Lee Woodall, that era. I'm all the way up to there. Anything after that, you lost me. But the Cowboys, how they was built young. They was built in a very innovative way. Not Jerry, but Jimmy Johnson was hungry, and he brought in a group of guys, regardless if it was free agents, whatever that he brought in. He brought in a group of guys that fit, that was him on the field, and they just ran with it. It was hungry, young, and eager. Hungry, young, and eager, and they would have beat 49ers because even when the 49ers had Joe Montana, I think the last run before he got hurt, and then they end up cutting him. And I think Cowboys was knocking on the door because Steve Young couldn't get him. He could not beat the Cowboys. It took them to get Deion Sanders to beat the Cowboys, and even with that, it's questionable because there was, of course, a couple of plays down the stretch where Deion Sanders got some pass interference calls, and they missed that. But anyway, Dallas Cowboys was a beast. They was a beast. They was legit. There was, and I care less to say that because I'm a 49ers guy, but I'll give credit where credit is due. If Jerry Jones would have stayed out the way, but he brings the guys in that who is his type, that's loud, that wants to be seen, and that's him. You're only going to bring in a guy that you are similar to, that you can relate with. It's very rare that you have a general manager or owner or a coach, whatever. You bring in a guy or a player that, or even upper management, a general manager or head coach, that's the opposite of you. When you do, it's going to be a struggle because, particularly if they're successful, you can go back as far as with the 85 Chicago Bears with Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka. You could see clearly that was Buddy Ryan's team. Why? Because he did it everywhere he went. His defense was dominant. He the one got you Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, and Eric Allen. He the one got you those players. When he went to Philadelphia. And the reason why Philadelphia became legit after that, even though they got Ray Rhodes, and then they started to roll over with that West Coast, and that's when they got Donovan McNabb, and they kept going. But that was Buddy Ryan's. He started that. He started that before the Brian Dawkins and all of them players getting over there before they initially make that next run. And I don't know who the coach was after Ray Rhodes was gone. I forgot who took it over, who got them to the Super Bowl. But that all comes from Buddy Ryan. Buddy Ryan put that stamp, that defense there, and they just built off of that. So the Lions have never had anything built here. Even when they went to 91 was almost like a fluke because their offense defense was based upon their team. You could say predominantly was based off of Barry Sanders. The team went as he went. Defense, special teams, everything. Even though you had a good guy in Eric Murray, Eddie Murray, and Mel Gray, you had those, but on the special teams, that is. But defense, what are you talking about? You gonna say Benny Blades? You gonna say Chris Spillman? That's all you got. If you're gonna say that was consistent, but not Pro Bowls, or not Pro Bowlers, not even all pros. There wasn't maybe the the top. They wasn't a top 10 at their position. So it's like unless you got top, you got to have like on all three levels. You got to have out of the three levels, uh, you got to have at least like particularly I'm talking about on defense, or even if you want to say like on offense as well, so from quarterback to special skilled players to so forth. The offensive line from quarterback, offensive line, and skill players, you're gonna have you're gonna have to have at least two to three different players that's in the top 10 at their position if you're going to be contenders. I mean, other than that, you're talking about like a well-oiled machine that basically everybody is complementing each other and they work as a unit. But with the defense, you got to at least have like in the defensive line, the linebacker core, and the secondary. You got to at least have two out of the three that's going to be at least in the top 10. Maybe at pushing the stretch, it's probably top 15 at their position. And if you look at the Lions from top to bottom, and the last time you probably can say that was when they had Ndamukong Suh and Calvin Johnson, because Stafford was not a top 10 quarterback and during that time. There's no way he's a top 10. And so Ndamukong Suh was a top 10 and Calvin Johnson was a top 10 at their positions. But that was the last time you had it. Other than that, you got to have at least two to three, and then everybody else got to be able to complement those two to three. But nobody, I mean, the defense was pretty much solid. The offense couldn't get it going because you had no quarterback. And then somebody could say that's a coordinator. And I'm going somewhere else. I'm ranting. But the point of me saying all that is to say there's no way the Lions can win until they undo what was done over 50 years ago. Whatever happened then, they're going to have to make atonement of that. They're going to have to rectify that situation because it keeps on continually to happen. Now, I'm the guy that's going to go on the record and repeatedly say, like, the Lions were one piece away or off-season away up under Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia. The only way that if I may alter something I just said, which may sound like a bit, I'm going to say like contradictory, but I would say the only way that they will win if the general manager they get in here, the owner, the general manager, as well as the head coach are inventive. One can't be. All three of them got to be inventive. That means if Miss Sheila Ford Hamp is taking over, she's going to have to be inventive. She got to have a larger view for this team, not just winning a title or winning divisions and threat and so forth. If they don't do this, you got to be inventive, like doing something different. Otherwise, you're going to keep on resurfacing the same thing, same results over and over. And that same deal goes down to the general manager. The general manager is going to have to be inventive. That retread thing of bringing somebody who have been successful somewhere else that's not going to work here. You have to be inventive because you're trying to destroy roots of a 50-year thing. Now, somebody was telling me this not too long ago. They were saying like, well, if anybody come here, they gotta get rid of all that thinking about they owe the Lions for 50-something years, or owe the fans for 50-something years. Like, well, if you don't destroy it, you're destined to repeat it. If you don't rectify that situation, you're gonna keep on repeating it because apparently you're still doing what is being done. If you keep getting the same results for 50 years, you're losing. So it's something about what you're doing. You're repeatedly doing something. Now you can here and there, get something here and there where you got an owner or something or a coach or whatever do something a little different as a splash, but it's not inventive. See, something like that. Can I say the word innovatation? If that's such a word, I don't know. But being creative is very infectious. Being creative is it's a trendsetter. It's a trailblazer. Let's call it that way. They are a trailblazer, and they do things outside of the box, but they do it so well that they get results. Everybody brought here, with the exception of Wayne Fonts. And let me see, Wayne Fonts. I want to say, yeah, maybe, yeah, Wayne Fonts is probably out of all the coaches that they brought here was probably, I don't know if he was an assistant. I think he was. I think he was part of the organization, and they hired in house with him. I believe that was the case. Out of everybody else, they were like a, there was a branch off some other regime. And it doesn't matter what system you brought in. You brought the Tampa 2, you brought the West Coast, you brought the Patriots way, you brought in every which way you possibly can have, except for one person to be inventive. You haven't brought one general manager, you haven't brought in one owner, I mean not owner, one coach that's inventive. They has their own, they're not a branch off nobody else, and they're creative themselves. This is why I'm a huge fan of Mike Tomlin. And even though he's coming from who was the coach before him, Bill Cowher, and I would say he's more successful than Bill Cowher. Now, of course, you're talking about statistics and all that. Championship may not, back that up, but he is inventive. Like they will lose one to have a losing season, then he'll come back the next season and they're back in contention. He's inventive. I don't know whoever else is over there. I don't know who was running the upper management, but that's the point of what I'm saying. They are inventive. The Lions is stale. That's why they got their traditions. It goes back to the 50s. And whatever, if anything is going back to the time that they were started losing, it should be scrapped off. But that's the thing. I don't think nobody's that inventive to do something new. So they're trying to keep the fan base together by keeping on the old stuff. You got to get rid of that. If I may jump over to the Pistons, the single mistake that the Pistons organization made, and I'm going to say this goes to the late Bill Davidson, the single mistake that they made was when they brought in the teal jerseys, whatever, during that time frame. The purpose of what that was to get rid of the image of the bad boys, right? That was the single. I don't want to call it the greatest mistake in the Pistons history. I want to say that trying to get rid of that foundation of what they had, Isaiah and them, they had to go through so much to win. And they try to detach themselves from it. I think that's like the worst thing they ever could have done in their franchise history. But with the Lions, they refused to nip whatever happened in the 50s in the bud, because you're still losing the same way for 50 years. Still losing the same way. 50 plus years, let's say it that way. With that being said, Lions fans, Piston fans, I salute.